When sport stops being fun, development slows down. And when development slows down, momentum fades. Imagine you are 13 years old and you don't have the courage to tell your mom you want to quit skiing. And that might sound strange coming from a two-time Olympian in cross-country skiing, but here's the truth. I didn't even like skiing as a kid. I grew up in a small village where sports was a part of everyday life. Movement wasn't scheduled, it was just what we did. And after school, we didn't go home, we went outside. And I was the kid who did everything in my spare time. I did figure skating, football, cross-country skiing, biathlon, dancing, volleyball, hockey, track and fields, and dancing. At one point, I even asked my mom if I could start play handball too. And she looked at me, almost laughing, and said, "Oh no, Moa, there's no time for that." And I still remember me thinking, what does she mean there's no time? There's always time for sports. In fact, for me, it couldn't be enough sports in my life. And why is this? Because I simply loved it. Not for the medals, not for the podiums, and not for the recognition. I just loved the feeling that came with it. The excitement before a competition, and the butterflies in my stomach before a game was about to start, and the friendship I made along the way. And the challenge of trying something new and not know if you could do it or if you would be good at it. And with High, sports is not just something I performed or competed in. It was not just a profession for me. It was a lifestyle. And with high ambitions and a passion bigger than life, of course I dreamed about making a career out of this from a very young age. Let me tell you a funny story. Usually in Sweden, during 7th grade, you write a letter to your future self, filled with hopes and dreams and thoughts for the upcoming years. And most of my classmates, they wrote about being rich, or meet a cute guy, or move to a bigger town. But could any of you guess what I wrote about? If you thought sports, you were absolutely right. I wrote about becoming a professional football player for the FC Barcelona Femení. Wow. And this was back in 2009. The Barcelona women's team wasn't even fully professional yet. It barely existed. But I was convinced that by the time I grew up, they would be. And I, Moa Ilar, I would play for them. I was so keen about this dream that I even chose Spanish in school because I was preparing myself for the move to Spain and Barcelona. And that was the dream. But sometimes, dreams don't always work out. And by the age of 15, I had a serious injury during a football game. And I still remember the collision with my opponent. And I still remember the sound of my knee twisting and turning and jumping out of joint. That hit took both my knee and my football dream away in the same second. And that injury had a profound impact on me. Don't get me wrong, I did recover physically. I'm standing here, right? But mentally, however, I was nowhere close to recovering in a long time. I actually became afraid. Afraid of contact with opponents, afraid of pushing myself on the field, afraid of doing 100%, and afraid of getting hurt or injured again. And slowly, almost without noticing, the fun for football disappeared. The ambition did not escape, and neither did my discipline, but the fun and the joy did, the part that I loved the most. And so naturally, when the joy disappeared, it took my momentum along with it. I think we often misunderstand momentum. We think momentum comes from success. We think you win, and the confidence appears. You perform well, and the flow occurs. We think pressure creates performance. So what do? We start adding pressure earlier and earlier. We measure, we compare, we rank, and slowly, sports become something to survive instead of something to experience. As a young athlete, every win felt like gave the opportunity to make me feel like I was good enough. But every loss felt like the opposite. And I think that many of us who try something early on feels this way in our everyday life too. For example, if you have a bad presentation in school, you feel like you're not good enough for your class or course. And as a young athlete, every loss took a huge mental toll on us. Why is this? Because we were always too focused on the results and the rankings. And it's easy to look at a result and measure and say success or failure. But you know what's much harder to evaluate? Courage, execution, progress, effort. Those things doesn't show up on a scoreboard, and yet they are the foundation of a great, great performance. Studies have shown that pressure takes such a mental toll on momentum in sports, and I see it like this. The earlier we specialize, the more we focus on the outcomes, the more we feel pressure. The more likely we are to lose the one very thing that drives long-term success. Joy. Don't get me wrong. Winning is fun. I love it. Trust me, I do. But development is deeply satisfying. Improving something that was hard yesterday, executing something you practiced for months, feeling your body and mind connected in a moment of flow. That's not about medals. That's about mastery. When I lost the full possibility to enjoy football, cross-country skiing became my savior. Thank you, Mom, for not letting me quit. Skiing taught me how to own your own potential. And when I wrapped my head around that, something surprisingly happened. I stopped obsessing over results. Not because I didn't care, but because I realized something. If my motivation were dependent on winning, it would always be fragile. There could always be someone faster. There could always be conditions weren't perfect for me. And it could always be a day where my body and mind doesn't respond. So instead of asking, what place did I get? I started to asking, okay, Moa, did you execute your plan? Did you focus on what you could control? And did you ski with courage? And slowly, something changed. I began to create momentum, regardless of the outcome. Because momentum is not something that appears after success. It's something that we generate internally, through presence, through ownership, and through joy in the process. Today, I train hundreds of hours. long endurance sessions, painful intervals, strength training, and a lot of other sacrifices. And to sustain that level of commitment, discipline is not enough. If discipline was the engine, joy is the fuel. Without joy, discipline burns out. Without joy, ambitions turns into pressure. And without joy, performance becomes fear-based. And fear, my friends, is never sustainable. I always give myself permission to fail, but never the permission not to try. Because if I won't try, I won't grow. And if I fail while giving my full effort, I develop into a better version than I was the time before. This talk is not just about sports and athletes. It's about students who stop raising their hands in class because they're afraid of being wrong. It's about employees who stop taking own initiatives because mistakes might be punished. And it's about those children who stop activities they once loved because the joy was replaced by expectations. So the next time someone loses motivation or momentum, don't ask, "What's wrong with you? What happened?" Instead ask, "Where did the joy go?" Because motivation rarely disappears on its own. It's usually squeezed out by comparison, by fear of failure, by pressure. And we don't build sustainable excellence by increasing pressure. We build it by protecting joy. Momentum is not something that appears after success. Momentum is not the result of winning. It's the result of loving the process. So when sports, or work, or school, or life stops being fun, development slows down. And when development slows down, momentum fades. But when we dare to shift focus from outcome to execution, from pressure to joy, momentum returns. And when momentum returns, performance always follows. Thank you.